The galaxy was old. It had seen empires rise and fall like waves on a shore. It had watched stars be born and die. And for thousands of years, it had been ruled by the same 12 species who sat on the Galactic Council. These species were ancient. They had traveled between stars when humans were still living in caves. They had built cities on 1,000 worlds when humans were just learning to make fire. To them, the universe belonged to the strong, the old, and the wise. And humans were none of these things. Humanity had only discovered faster-than-light travel 300 years ago. In galactic terms, this was like yesterday. They were babies taking their first steps while everyone else had been running for ages. The council species looked at humans the way adults look at children playing pretend. They found them amusing, sometimes annoying, but never threatening. Ambassador Elena Vasquez had spent her entire adult life trying to change this. She was 52 years old now. Her dark hair had turned gray at the temples. Lines had formed around her eyes from years of forced smiles and careful words. She had joined the diplomatic corps when she was 25, full of hope and dreams of a better future for her people. Now, almost 3 decades later, she was tired, but she had not given up. Elena had submitted humanity's application for council membership 15 years ago. 15 years of meetings, 15 years of paperwork, 15 years of being told to wait, to be patient, to prove themselves worthy. She had done everything they asked. She had followed every rule. She had never raised her voice or shown anger. Even when council members insulted her species to her face, today was supposed to be the day. Everything changed. The Chamber of Stars was the most impressive room Elena had ever seen. It sat at the heart of the council station, a massive structure that floated in neutral space between the territories of the 12 member species. The chamber itself was a perfect sphere, with seats arranged in rings that rose up the walls. At the center, a platform floated in empty air where speakers would stand. Elena stood on that platform now, looking up at the representatives of 12 civilizations. Some were massive, towering creatures with shells of living rock. Others were small, delicate beings made of light and energy. Some breathed oxygen like humans. Others existed in bubbles of methane or ammonia. They were as different from each other as they were from humanity. But they all shared one thing. They all looked down at her with the same expression. It was the look someone gives an insect that has wandered into their home. "Hi." Councilor Dexeron of the Veloxi Dominion rose from his seat. The Veloxi were perhaps the most powerful species on the council. They controlled more territory than any other race. Their fleets were vast. Their technology was advanced beyond anything humans had achieved. And Dexeron was their leader. He was tall and thin, with gray skin that glowed faintly with bioluminescent patterns. His eyes were large and black, like pools of oil. When he spoke, his voice was soft, but carried perfectly through the chamber. "We have reviewed humanity's application," he said. "We have studied your species for many years. We have watched you expand across your little corner of space. We have seen your wars, your conflicts, your endless struggles with each other." Lena felt her heart beating faster. This was it. After all these years, she would finally hear their decision. Dexeron continued. "The council has reached a unanimous decision." Lena held her breath. Humanity's application for membership is denied. The word hit her like a physical blow. Denied. After everything. After 15 years? Denied. But Dexeron was not finished. Furthermore, he said, and now there was something in his voice that sounded almost like pleasure. "The council has decided to designate humanity as a protected species under Galactic Law Section 7. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. She knew what that meant. Everyone knew what that meant. Protected species was a status given to primitive civilizations. Species that were too young, too weak, too foolish to take care of themselves. It meant humanity could no longer expand to new worlds. It meant they could no longer build military vessels. It meant they could not defend themselves without asking permission from the council first. It meant humanity was now property. "This designation is permanent," Dexeron said. "It cannot be appealed. Humanity will remain under Council protection until such time as the Council decides otherwise. Around the chamber, Alina heard sounds that might have been laughter. Clicking, chittering, humming sounds from a dozen different species. They were laughing at her. Laughing at humanity. Laughing at 300 years of struggle and hope. Alina wanted to scream. She wanted to curse them all. She wanted to tell them what she really thought of their ancient, arrogant civilization. But she was a diplomat. So she simply bowed her head and said, "I understand, High Counselor. I will relay this decision to my government." She walked out of the Chamber of Stars with her head held high. She did not let them see her cry. She saved that for later, alone in her quarters on the transport ship back to Earth. The journey home took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of silence. 3 weeks of staring at the stars and wondering what she would tell her people. How do you tell 8 billion humans that they have been declared children by the rest of the galaxy? How do you explain that everything they worked for meant nothing? When Alina finally arrived on Earth, she went directly to the United Nations headquarters in Geneva. The leaders of every nation were waiting for her. Presidents and prime ministers, kings and chancellors. They sat in silence as she told them what had happened. When she finished, no one spoke for a long time. Finally, the President of the United States, a woman named Catherine Moore, asked a simple question. "What do we do now?" Alina had thought about this question for 3 weeks. She had considered 100 different answers: diplomacy, protest, appeal, acceptance. But as she stood before the leaders of humanity, she realized something had changed inside her. Something had broken. Or perhaps something had finally woken up. "I don't know," she said honestly. "But I know what we cannot do. We cannot accept this. We cannot let them treat us like animals in a zoo. We are human beings. We have survived ice ages and plagues and wars. We have split the atom and walked on the moon. We did not come this far to be told we are not worthy." The room remained silent. But Alina could see something in their eyes. Something she had not seen before. It was anger. Cold, quiet, patient anger. In the weeks that followed, something strange happened on Earth. The argument stopped. The political fights that had divided nations for centuries suddenly seemed unimportant. Democrats and Republicans, liberals and conservatives, East and West, none of it mattered anymore, because now humanity had a common enemy. Not an enemy they wanted to fight, but an enemy that had made itself known, an enemy that had looked at everything humans had achieved and said it was not enough. Alina did not know what would happen next. She did not know if humanity would rise or fall, but she knew one thing for certain. The galaxy had made a mistake. They had humiliated humanity in front of the stars. They had laughed and called them children, and humans, as history had proven many times, did not forget. They did not forgive. And they did not stay down for long. Something was coming. Alina could feel it in her bones. The galaxy just did not know it yet. 6 months had passed since the Council's decision. Life went on, as it always does. People still went to work. Children still went to school. Ships still traveled between human colonies, carrying food and supplies, and ordinary people living ordinary lives. The Meridian was one of these ships. It was not a military vessel. It was not important or famous. It was simply a cargo transport that made regular runs between Earth and the colony on Kepler 4 to B. It carried farming equipment, medical supplies, and passengers. Families moving to new homes, workers traveling for jobs, students heading to universities on distant worlds. Captain Sarah Chen had commanded the Meridian for 12 years. She was a practical woman who liked routine and hated surprises. Her crew of 40 knew their jobs and did them well. Her passengers, nearly 2,000 of them on this trip, trusted her to get them safely to their destination. They were 3 days from Kepler 4 to B. When the Veluxy ships appeared, Sarah was on the bridge when her sensor officer called out the warning. "Captain, I'm reading 5 Veluxy patrol vessels dropping out of faster than light. They're on an intercept course." Sarah felt a cold knot form in her stomach. The Thesan corridor was a trade route humanity had used for decades. They had never had problems here before. But that was before the protected species designation. "Open a channel," she ordered. Let's find out what they want. The face that appeared on her screen was Veluxy. Gray skin, black eyes, the same cold expression she had seen in news reports of High Counselor Lexeron. This one wore the uniform of a military commander. Human vessel, the Veluxy said. You are traveling through Dominion space. Under Galactic Law Section 7, protected species are required to submit to inspection. You will power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Sarah's hands gripped the arms of her chair. This is a civilian transport. We're carrying families, children. We have nothing to hide. But I request that you allow us to continue to our destination and conduct any inspection there. The Veluxy commander's mouth twisted into something that might have been a smile. Request denied. You will comply immediately or be fired upon. Sarah looked at her tactical officer. Under the new laws, the Meridian had been stripped of all weapons. They had no shields worth mentioning. They were completely defenseless. She had no choice. All hands, she said over the ship's intercom, her voice steady despite her fear. Prepare for boarding. Remain calm. Cooperate with the Veluxy officers. We have done nothing wrong. This is just a routine inspection. It was not routine. Sarah knew it the moment the first Veluxy soldiers came aboard. They did not inspect the cargo. They did not check the ship's papers. They went straight for the passenger compartments and began dragging people out of their rooms. Families were separated. Children were torn from their parents' arms. Anyone who resisted was beaten. Sarah tried to stop them. She demanded to speak to their commander. She cited laws and regulations and treaties. The Veluxy soldiers ignored her completely, as if she were not even there. Within hours, every passenger and crew member on the Meridian had been transferred to the Veluxy ships. Sarah was the last to leave. As she was forced off her own bridge, she saw a Veluxy officer plant something on the ship's reactor. What are you doing? She demanded. The officer looked at her with those cold, black eyes. Removing evidence. The Meridian exploded 5 minutes later. Sarah watched through the window of the Veluxy ship as her vessel, her home for 12 years, became a ball of fire and debris. What happened next would only become known months later, when a Veluxy defector smuggled a recording off one of the patrol ships. The prisoners were taken to a facility on a moon in Veluxy space. It was not a prison. It was not a detention center. It was something worse. The recording showed crowded cells where humans were packed together like animals. It showed guards who beat prisoners for amusement. It showed children separated from parents crying alone in dark rooms. It showed medical experiments conducted without consent or anesthesia. It showed bodies being disposed of in incinerators when the experiments failed. 2,000 people had been aboard the Meridian. By the time the recording was made, 6 weeks later, fewer than 300 remained alive. Sarah Chen was not among them. According to the recording, she had been executed on the first day for attempting to organize resistance among the prisoners. When the recording reached Earth, it spread across every network within hours. People watched in their homes, in their offices, in the streets. They saw what had been done to their people. They saw the faces of the victims. They heard their screams, and then something happened that no one expected. Nothing. There were no riots, no protests, no angry mobs in the streets. The human race simply went quiet. Embassies were closed. Human ambassadors on alien worlds packed their bags and went home without a word of explanation. Trade agreements were canceled. Communication channels were shut down. Within a week, no human ship was traveling outside the Sol system. The Council received a single message from Earth. It came from Ambassador Elena Vasquez, the same woman they had humiliated 6 months earlier. The message contained only 2 sentences. We have received your message. We understand. The council members did not know what to make of this. Some thought humanity had finally accepted its place. Others thought they were simply too shocked to respond. A few worried that something else was happening, but they were dismissed as paranoid. High Counselor Vexeron was pleased. He had ordered the action against the Meridians specifically to teach humanity a lesson. To show them what happened to species that thought they were better than they were. The lesson, it seemed, had been learned. He went back to his regular duties. The incident was filed away and forgotten. On Earth, The silence continued. But behind that silence, something was happening. In government buildings around the world, meetings were being held. Meetings with no records, no minutes, no witnesses. Leaders who had been enemies for generations sat together and spoke. With one voice, in military bases and research facilities, scientists and engineers who had spent their careers competing against each other began to work together. Projects that had been abandoned for lack of funding were suddenly given unlimited resources. Factories that had been closed for decades roared back to life, and in homes across the planet. Parents looked at their children and made silent promises. Promises that what happened to the families on the Meridian would never happen again. Promises that humanity would never again be helpless. The recording from the Veluxy facility was shown once, and then it was sealed. But no one who saw it ever forgot. The images were burned into human memory. The faces of the dead became sacred. Their names were recorded and remembered. 2,000 souls had been taken. 2,000 reasons to never forget. 2,000 reasons to make sure the galaxy learned a lesson of its own. The silence continued for 18 months. 18 months of darkness from the Sol system. 18 months of wondering what humanity was doing behind its closed borders. The galaxy assumed they were grieving. The galaxy assumed they had given up. The galaxy assumed wrong. The Sol system had gone dark. And the galaxy did not care. Trade continued as it always had. The council met and argued over the same petty disputes that had occupied them for centuries. The elder species went about their business, barely noticing the absence of human ships in their ports. Humanity had been a small player in galactic affairs. Their disappearance was like a single candle being blown out in a room full of lights. No one saw what was happening behind the closed borders on Earth. Every nation had signed a single document. They called it the Unity Accord. For the first time in human history, all of humanity spoke with one voice. There were no more separate governments, no more competing interests, no more petty conflicts over land or resources or ideology. There was only one goal now, one purpose, one mission: never again. Admiral Jonah Marcus had spent his career arguing for peace. He was 60 years old, a tall man with white hair and kind eyes. He had joined the Navy as a young man because he believed in protecting people, not in killing them. He had risen through the ranks by being smart, by being careful, by finding solutions that did not involve violence. When they first told him about the plan, he refused. "This is madness," he said to the council of leaders who had summoned him. "You're talking about building a war fleet? You're talking about attacking the most powerful civilization in the galaxy. The Veluxy have 1,000 times more ships than we do. They've been fighting wars since before humans existed. We would be destroyed." President Catherine Moore looked at him with eyes that had changed since he last saw her. They were harder now. Colder. "We've run the numbers, Admiral. We know the odds." "Then you know this is suicide." "Perhaps." She slid a tablet across the table to him. "Before you make your final decision, I want you to watch something." Jonah picked up the tablet. On the screen was a video file. He pressed play. 20 minutes later, he was still sitting in the same chair. The tablet lay on the table in front of him, its screen dark. His hands were shaking. Tears ran down his face, though he did not seem to notice them. He had seen the recording from the Veluxy facility. He had seen what they did to the passengers of the Meridian. He had seen children crying for parents who would never come. He had seen medical tables covered in blood. He had seen the face of Captain Sarah Chen in the moment before her execution. "How many people have seen this?" he asked quietly. "Everyone," President Moore said. "Every adult on Earth. Every colonist on every human world. We showed it once, and then we locked it away. But no one who saw it will ever forget." Jonah looked up at her. The kindness had left his eyes. Something else had taken its place. "What do you need me to do?" They gave him command of a fleet that did not exist yet. A fleet that would be built in secret, in shipyards hidden in the asteroid belts beyond Mars. A fleet that would be larger and more powerful than anything humanity had ever created. The resources were already flowing. Every nation on Earth had contributed everything they had. Factories that had been making cars now made ship components. Scientists who had been researching medicine now researched weapons. Engineers who had been building bridges now built warships. And they did it in complete silence. No announcements. No news reports. No information leaving the Sol system. As far as the galaxy knew, humanity was still sitting in the dark, crying over their dead. Let them think that, Jonah thought. Let them believe we are broken. The shipyards were built in the shadows of asteroids, hidden from any sensors that might be watching. Workers lived there for months at a time, cut off from their families, forbidden from any outside communication. They worked 18-hour shifts, 7 days a week. They did not complain. They all knew why they were there. They had all seen the recording. Human engineers studied every piece of alien technology they had ever traded for. They took apart Veloxi engines and Thesan shields and Karathi weapons. They learned how they worked. And then they made them better. It turned out that humans had a gift the elder species had forgotten. They called it innovation. The ability to look at something and ask, how can this be improved? The elder species had been using the same technology for thousands of years. They had stopped trying to make it better because they believed it was already perfect. Humans did not believe in perfection. They believed in progress. Within 6 months, human ships were faster than Veloxi ships. Within a year, their weapons were more powerful. Within 18 months, their shields were stronger, their sensors were sharper, and their tactics were completely new. Jonah spent those months training his crews. He recruited the best pilots, the best gunners, the best officers from every human world. He ran simulations day and night, over and over, until his people could fly their ships in their sleep. He studied Veloxi battle tactics until he knew them better than the Veloxi themselves. And he taught his crews something that alien commanders would never understand. The Veloxi fight to win, he told them. They fight to gain territory, to increase their power, to prove their superiority. But that is not why we fight. He would pause then and look at the faces of his crew. Young men and women who had volunteered for what might be a one-way mission. We fight because 2,000 of our people were taken from us. We fight because children were torn from their mother's arms. We fight because the galaxy looked at humanity and saw weakness. His voice would grow hard. We are going to show them what human weakness looks like. We are going to teach them a lesson they will never forget. And we are going to do it not because we want power or territory. We are going to do it because no one hurts our people. No one. Ever again. When the fleet was finally ready, it was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. 4,000 warships, each one a masterpiece of human engineering. They carried weapons that could crack planets and shields that could withstand stars. They were crewed by men and women who had trained for this moment their entire lives. Jonah stood on the bridge of his flagship, the UHS Meridian, named for the ship that had started everything. Around him, his fleet waited in the darkness between planets. Invisible to any sensor, a message arrived from Earth. It was from Ambassador Alina Vasquez. "Admiral," she said, "I have sent a transmission to the Council. It contains 2 words. They will not understand them now, but they will soon." Jonah smiled grimly. What were the words? "Remember us." He nodded slowly. "They will." He turned to his communications officer. "Signal all ships. Set course for Thesa Prime." 4,000 ships activated their engines simultaneously. The darkness of space was briefly lit by the glow of human technology. And then they were gone, racing toward the heart of the Veloxi Dominion at speeds the galaxy thought possible. The silence was over. The storm had begun. Thesa Prime was the crown jewel of the Veloxi Dominion. It was a world of towering cities and ancient monuments, home to 40 billion Veloxi. For 10,000 years, it had been the center of their civilization. No enemy had ever attacked it. No enemy had ever dared. The planet was protected by the largest defense grid in the galaxy. Thousands of orbital stations surrounded it, each one bristling with weapons that could destroy entire fleets. Beyond that, the Veloxi home fleet patrolled constantly. 2,000 of the most advanced warships in existence, crewed by veterans who had fought and won 100 battles, High Counselor. Dexeron slept peacefully in his palace that night. He had received the strange message from humanity. Remember us. He'd laughed and deleted it. What could humans do? They were a protected species. They had no weapons, no fleet, no power. They were nothing. He would learn how wrong he was very soon. At exactly midnight, local time, the sensors around Thesa Prime detected something impossible. A massive fleet was dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. The operators stared at their screens, certain there must be a mistake. 4,000 ships. Human ships. The alarms spread through the system like fire. Commanders who had been sleeping were dragged from their beds. The home fleet scrambled to form defensive positions. Vexeron was woken by an aide who could barely speak through his terror. High Counselor, the aide said. The humans are here. Vexeron refused to believe it at first. He demanded confirmation. When it came, he still did not understand. How had humans built such a fleet? How had they traveled so far without being detected? How had they dared to attack the Veluxi homeworld? But confusion quickly turned to confidence. The Veluxi had the advantage of position. They had their defense grid. They had their veteran fleet. The humans were walking into a trap. Destroy them, Vexeron ordered. Leave no survivors. The Veluxi fleet moved to intercept the human armada. Their commanders were experienced and skilled. They formed their ships into the classic Veluxi battle formation, a pattern that had brought them victory for centuries. They outnumbered the humans. They knew their home territory. It should have been an easy victory. It was not, Admiral. Jonah Marcus had studied Veluxi tactics for 18 months. He knew their formations. He knew their strategies. He knew their weaknesses. And he had designed his fleet specifically to exploit every single one. The human ships did not form neat lines like the Veluxi expected. They broke into small groups that moved independently, striking from unexpected angles. They used their superior speed to dodge and weave through enemy fire. They targeted the weak points in Veluxi ships that even the Veluxi had forgotten existed, and they did not fight. Like a species that feared death, the Veluxi were used to enemies who retreated when the battle turned against them. Enemies who surrendered when their ships were damaged. Enemies who valued their own survival above victory. Humans were not like that. Human ships that were badly damaged did not retreat. They accelerated toward the nearest enemy vessel and detonated their reactors, destroying both ships in a blinding explosion. Human pilots ejected from crippled fighters and steered the wreckage into enemy sensors. Human crews who knew they were dying used their last moments to transmit targeting data to their comrades. The Veluxi had never faced an enemy like this. They did not know how to fight people who were not afraid to die. The battle lasted 11 hours. In the first hour, the humans broke through the outer defensive line, destroying dozens of orbital stations. In the second hour, they engaged the home fleet directly, and the space around Thesa Prime became a storm of fire and debris. In the fifth hour, the Veluxi commander ordered a tactical retreat to regroup. In the sixth hour, he realized that the humans were not letting them retreat. Every Veluxia ship that tried to escape was pursued and destroyed. Every commander who tried to surrender received the same response. The humans would broadcast a video on all channels. The same video that had been shown to every human in the Sol system, the recording from the facility where the Meridian's passengers had died, and then they would continue fighting. By the eighth hour, the Veluxi fleet was in chaos. Ships fled in all directions, abandoning formation, abandoning strategy, abandoning hope. The defense grid had been reduced to scattered debris. The orbital stations were silent wreckage floating in space. By the 11th hour, it was over. Not a single Veluxi warship remained operational. Not a single defensive station still functioned. The largest fleet in the galaxy had been completely destroyed by a species that had been declared too primitive to defend itself, Admiral. Marcus positioned his fleet in orbit above Thesa Prime. 40 billion Veluxi looked up at the sky and saw human ships where their own fleet should have been. They waited for the bombardment to begin. They waited for their world to burn. It did not come. Instead, transmission was broadcast to every screen, every speaker, every communication device on the planet. It showed a human face. An old man with white hair and tired eyes. Admiral Jonah Marcus. "People of Thesa Prime," he said, "I am not here to destroy your world. I am not here to kill your civilians. I am not here for revenge." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was harder. "I am here to read names." And then he began. Sarah Chen. Captain. Age 47. Mother of 2. David Okonkwo. Engineer. Age 31. Newly married. Meilin Wong. Age 7. She liked to draw pictures of stars, name after name. 2,000 names. The complete passenger and crew manifest of the Meridian. Every person who had been taken, every person who had died in that facility, Admiral Marcus read each name slowly, clearly, with respect. It took 4 hours. When he finished, he looked directly into the camera. These were our people. They were not soldiers. They were not threats. They were families, children, ordinary people living ordinary lives. And your government took them, tortured them, killed them. He let the silence stretch for a long moment. The galaxy told us we were too weak to protect ourselves, too primitive, too young. So we protected ourselves anyway. Your fleet is gone. Your defenses are gone. Your homeworld lies open before us. In his palace, Dexeron watched the transmission with growing horror. He had expected bombardment. He had expected demands for surrender. He had not expected this. "We could destroy your world," Marcus continued. "We have that power now. But we will not. We are not monsters. We do not murder civilians. That is the difference between us and you. But we do have demands. And they are not negotiable." The transmission cut to Ambassador Elena Vasquez. She stood in a room on Earth, looking into the camera with eyes that held no warmth. "The Council will receive our terms within the hour. They will accept them. All of them. Or we will visit every Council homeworld, one by one, and repeat what happened here today." She leaned forward. "Out. You have 1 hour to decide." On Thesa Prime, 40 billion Veluxi waited in silence. Above them, 4,000 human ships held position, patient and unmoving. The hour began to count down. The terms arrived at the council chamber, exactly 1 hour after Ambassador Vasquez had promised them. The 12 representatives of the galaxy's most powerful species sat in their seats, staring at the document that would change everything. It was not long. Humans, it turned out, did not need many words to say what they meant. The protected species designation would be abolished. Not just for humanity, but for all species currently held under that status. Every civilization in the galaxy would have the right to defend itself. The Veluxi Dominion would pay full reparations to the families of everyone who died in the incident with the Meridian. Every family would receive compensation. Every name would be formally acknowledged. High Counselor Vexeron would be removed from his position and placed on trial for crimes against sentient beings. The trial would be public, broadcast across the galaxy for all to see, and humanity would receive a permanent seat on the Galactic Council. Not as observers, not as junior members, as full equals with all the rights and powers that came with that status. The representatives read the terms in silence. Then they began to argue. "This is unacceptable," declared the representative from the Korthi Empire. "We cannot allow a species that has been in space for only 3 centuries to dictate terms to civilizations that have existed for millennia." Veluxi fleet was the most powerful in the galaxy, added the Thesan delegate. "If the humans could destroy it, they could destroy any of us. We must unite against this threat." The arguments went on for 45 minutes. Representatives shouted at each other. Accusations flew back and forth. Some demanded immediate counterattack. Others insisted on negotiation. A few quietly began calculating how they could use this situation to their advantage. Then the sensors detected something that ended all debate. Human ships had appeared. Not just over Thesa Prime, but over every council homeworld simultaneously. Hundreds of vessels in each system, holding position just outside weapons range. Not attacking, not threatening. Just waiting. A reminder of what humanity could do if they chose. The argument stopped. The representatives looked at each other, and one by one, they accepted the terms. The vote was unanimous. 3 months later, the trial of Vexron began. He was brought before a special court on the council station. In the same chamber of stars where he had once laughed at humanity's request for membership, the evidence was overwhelming. The recording from the facility, testimony from survivors. Documents proving that Vexron had personally ordered the attack on the Meridian and the subsequent treatment of its passengers. He tried to defend himself. He claimed he was protecting the galaxy from human aggression. He claimed the passengers were enemy combatants. He claimed the recording was fabricated. No one believed him. The trial lasted 2 weeks. At the end, he was found guilty of crimes against sentient beings and sentenced to imprisonment on a barren moon at the edge of known space. He would spend the rest of his life there, alone, nothing but his memories and his regrets. As he was led away, he passed Ambassador Elena Vasquez. She was standing quietly near the chamber doors, watching him go. He stopped and looked at her. His eyes, once so arrogant, were now hollow. "Are you satisfied?" he asked. "You have destroyed everything I built. You have humiliated my people. Is this what you wanted?" Elena considered the question for a moment. "No," she said finally. "What I wanted was respect. What I wanted was for my people to be treated as equals. That is all we ever asked for." She stepped closer to him. "You could have given us that. You could have simply said yes to our application and welcomed us into the community of species. We would have been grateful allies. We would have contributed everything we had to the betterment of the galaxy." Her voice grew harder. "Instead, you chose to laugh at us, to humiliate us, to designate us as property, and when that was not enough, you chose to murder our civilians." She leaned in close. "You did this, Vexron, not us. You created the enemy you feared." The guards led him away. Elena watched until he disappeared from sight, then turned and walked toward the chamber where she would take her seat for the first time. 6 months after the trial, the galaxy had begun to adjust to its new reality. The Veluxi Dominion had collapsed into civil war without Vexron's leadership. Different factions fought for control, each blaming the others for the disaster that had befallen their species. They were no longer a power in galactic affairs. They were too busy fighting themselves. The other council species had learned a valuable lesson. They no longer dismissed younger civilizations as unimportant. They no longer assumed that technology and age guaranteed superiority. They had seen what happened when you pushed a species too far, and humanity had changed as well. The unity that had formed in response to the Meridian incident did not disappear after the victory. For the first time in their history, humans continued to work together. Old rivalries faded. Old hatreds were forgotten. The human race had discovered something more powerful than any weapon they had built. They had discovered what they could accomplish when they stood together. Ambassador Elena Vasquez took her seat on the council on a warm afternoon in spring. The same chamber that had once laughed at her now sat in respectful silence as she entered. She was older now. Her hair was completely gray, and there were more lines on her face than before, but her eyes were clear and strong. She had lived long enough to see this day. The council session began with routine business. Trade agreements, border disputes, the same matters that had occupied the chamber for thousands of years. Elena listened and participated, treating her fellow council members with courtesy and respect. Then, as the session was ending, the Karathi representative raised a question. "Ambassador Vasquez," he said, "I must ask something that has troubled me since the events at Thesa Prime." Elena nodded. "Ask. Your fleet could have destroyed the Veluxi homeworld. You had the power to kill billions of people. Why did you not use it?" The chamber went silent. Everyone waited for her answer. Elena thought for a long moment before speaking. "Because that is not who we are," she said. "We did not build our fleet to commit genocide. We've built it to protect ourselves, to show the galaxy that humanity could not be pushed around, to make sure that what happened to the Meridian would never happen again. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each representative. We are not conquerors. We are not monsters. We are human beings. We get angry. We seek justice. We protect our own. But we do not murder innocent civilians, no matter what crimes their leaders have committed. That is the difference between justice and revenge. And humanity chose justice. The chamber remained silent. Then, slowly, the Karathi representative bowed his head in acknowledgement. The session ended. Representatives filed out, discussing the day's business in quiet voices. Alina remained in her seat, looking around the empty chamber. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. 15 years of being ignored, the humiliation of the protected species designation, the horror of the Meridian, 18 months of silence and preparation, the battle at Thesa Prime, the trial, and finally, this moment. Humanity had won its place among the stars. Not through diplomacy, not through patience, but through strength and determination and the willingness to do whatever was necessary to protect their own. It was not the path Alina would have chosen. She still believed in peace. She still believed that different species could learn to live together in harmony. But she had learned something else as well. Sometimes peace must be earned. Sometimes respect must be demanded. And sometimes the only way to get a seat at the table is to show that you are strong enough to take it. She rose from her seat and walked out of the chamber. The future was uncertain. The galaxy was still dangerous. There would be new challenges, new enemies, new crises to face. But humanity would face them together, and they would face them as equals. The galaxy had learned its lesson, and humanity would make sure they never forgot it.